Hey guys, my name is RyanCentral and welcome to HitScan. We have the patch here and it's got quite a few agent changes in here, buffs and nerfs galore, as well as a few quality of life bits and pieces that I did want to mention. The first change that I think is probably the most interesting when it comes to the agent that it hits is Brimstone. To go over the changes real quick, his ultimate cost has been upped from 6 to 7 ult points. His stim beacon no longer buffs enemies or shows enemies its effective radius to them. The arm fidelity is also changed, making Brimstone a bit more jacked, I think, Miska. So,
hell yeah.
What do you think about these changes? You mentioned when you saw these that the stim beacon change looks like a buff, but could actually be a bit of a nerf.
Yeah, so Brimstone is just a character that I've played a lot, and I really feel like it's one of my, not necessarily just safe picks, but if you want to just enjoy Valorant and enjoy the gunplay, Brimstone's a great character to not have to over-focus on abilities. But one thing that I did like to do a lot was with the stim beacon to throw that in another corner, so people would think that you've thrown the stim beacon down where you're standing, and then when they try to, go around a corner, maybe they have a left and right peek, then they'll check the wrong side, or they'll just have to look over there because they'll think you're standing in the corner, when in reality you just sort of tossed it as a fake. And you can't do that anymore with this, which I think is kind of bad, to be honest, because when you were doing that, you didn't really fall into the territory of accidentally giving them the buff either, because it would have to be far back enough for them to just see it and consider that angle before they turn the corner, right? So yeah, I think that's a bit bad. I'm not sure if I like that, honestly. I'm not sure if I'm a big fan of the stim beacon changes here, but not giving it to enemies, that's cool. Happy with that. Orbital strike change I think makes sense as well, changing that from 6 to 7 ult points. And they put here as well, much like Raze's ultimate, Brimstone's ult is very impactful and useful in a wide variety of situations, and this is very true. They've changed certain ultimates and certain ult points in the past, and I'm sure we're gonna see more of this in the future, because I feel like it's a good way to tweak agents, just overall power. And yeah, I mean, I'm all for more jacked Brimstone and better arm fidelity, that's cool. So yeah, gonna be interesting to see that in game for sure.
You mentioned the orbital strike change there, and like the notes say, it says much like Raze's ultimate, Brimstone's ult is very impactful. And that is because Raze's showstopper ultimate got the exact same nerf same as Brimstone's, going up from 6 to 7 ultimate points. To quickly read this, they said that Raze's ultimate is one of the most impactful in the game, which is, yeah, true, and useful in almost any situation. It's been used a bit too often, we're upping the cost by 1, which should help reduce how often players have to face her showstopper. I feel pretty proud, as this was my idea on how to nerf Raze when we spoke about it in the last video, because I don't really think the showstopper is super duper strong, because yeah, it has a lot of impact getting a frag, but you could very easily muck it up by just missing the shot, firing it too early, firing it too late, or getting killed in the process of you trying to find the target, right? So you can punish a bad Raze that's trying to use her ultimate. It's not just a game-winning ultimate in general. So I think this is just a nice change to make it a little less frequently up. And like you mentioned, it's an easy fix. Otherwise, I don't think Raze needed all that much change to her, I don't think.
Honestly, I think this is a great change, but one thing I'm, well, I guess a little bit worried about around the showstopper ultimate is that when you spot the Raze and you try to headshot her, if you don't sort of hit her with the first shot, when she fires that thing and she gets knocked back like that, you can't really track her at all anymore. And that means that a lot of the time, even if she's almost point blank range and didn't really know you were there and just, threw out a sloppy ultimate, you can still get value with it, which I think is the dangerous part around Raze, being able to get value without really having to try too hard. It's going to be interesting to find out. Another character as well that we've been seeing a lot of, well, I guess just talk around and also not too much play on, but at least a lot of people being interested in seeing played more is Viper, who's had some very interesting changes, quite a few as well. You want to cover them?
Yeah, to go over them fairly extensively at least. We'll go over the smallest one first so we can get it out of the way, I suppose. Decay when it comes to the Viper's Pit, the toxic clouds and stuff, the decay per second has been increased from 10 to 15, meaning that people should decay, well, a lot faster. Also, a nice quality of life change is the fuel gauge. Usually when you have both Poison Cloud and Toxic Screen active, your fuel dives twice as quickly because more stuff is being consumed overall. But now having them both up at the same time does not consume additional fuel beyond the cost of having one active, which I think is actually super strong. But I guess when it comes to the major changes worth looking out for, Viper's Pit is the one that really takes the cake there. This is a change that Morello mentioned briefly, we covered in another video I think, but basically the max time that she could spend outside of her ultimate Viper's Pit, it's usually 5 seconds. You can only be outside the ultimate for 5 seconds before the pit disappears basically. Now that's been up to 12 seconds, which might not sound like much, but now that ultimate could be used more frequently, it could be used in various situations, and I guess most importantly, you could use the ultimate for Viper and not have an orbital strike just planted on top of you that would force you out and force you to die in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty interesting change to the ultimate, because it's not really so much about buffing the use of the ultimate, like being inside it, but more about giving you a little bit more options around it, which I think is probably the way to go, but it's also going to be tricky. You're still going to have to be a pretty good Viper player to utilize all of this. There were also a couple smaller things, like enemies in Viper's Pit have their minimap obscured and do not provide minimap detection to their allies now, which I think is actually, you know, I think you'll notice that more often. Like, say that you're trying to retake a site and one of your allies is already around the Viper's Pit, and they walk in and they get shot and they don't really know from where, but maybe they were on their screen. All of a sudden you won't have that info anymore. I think that's pretty big. And also that the decay on you will sustain now for 2.5 seconds before starting to fade after you exit Viper's smoke, which I think as well is really nice to have there, because it felt like you could kind of walk through a smoke and not really worry too much about it. But now, as you decay faster, even if you just spend a little bit of time in it, you'll still have that decay on you for a little bit longer. So I'm happy with this. This looks pretty cool. I wonder what it's going to do to the character. It's still going to be a pretty intense character to play, in the way that you have so many active abilities and things you can change and things to plan for ahead of time. And obviously the wall is still going to be a major part of Viper's kit, and that you obviously can't just pick up and throw out again. So still some things to work around. But yeah, more options, more fun, hopefully a better win rate as well.
Is it enough though, do you feel? Like, there's a lot of changes that have come to her in various different positions. Now pretty much all of her abilities and ultimate have been changed to some extent, but I'm still not really that convinced. I just don't see what Viper can really do that Omen and Brimstone can in a lot of cases. Granted, we spoke to Morello about the roles of each of these agents in particular, but when you have Brimstone being such a consistent option, Omen really becoming the strongest controller in the game, I think, certainly now with a couple more nerfs to Brimstone at least, it's just like the competition that Viper has to deal with is incredibly fierce, and because of that, even with these changes, I just don't see a world realistically where picking Viper over Brimstone and Omen would necessarily be the best idea. I don't know about you though.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I didn't really think of that. You're right, I think that's still the case. There's just gonna be some crazy players though that are able to utilize all of this really well. And like, for example, one thing that I think is we haven't necessarily highlighted enough is that if you think about the fuel and the decay, what that does is that it really ups the value of the poison cloud, like so much. Poison cloud is gonna be really strong now because you can use it as you have your toxin screen up. So you can do your one ways and everything. And if someone still wants to push through it quickly, they will keep that decay for longer and be decayed more. So you have kind of a double buff in one area there, which, you know, it's split up into two in the patch notes, but it really will have a strong like effect on the players, which you're only gonna start thinking about it once you try to go, I'll just run out through the smoke. My ally is running out on, say, A main, and I'm running out on A long or whatever. Okay, cool. Now we can push at the same time, and you go through the smoke, and all of a sudden you die super fast to just like a body shot or two because of the decay. So yeah, you're gonna start running into some issues in some situations with a good enough Viper, but yeah, I don't think it's enough to compete with the likes of Brimstone and Omen, who are also, I think, easier to play, and that's a pretty big factor.
Yeah, I think it's just when it comes to the impact you get for the effort that you put in, both these agents are top of their game. Viper's probably not too far behind when it comes to these changes, but still, it's hard to say. We don't really know at this point. People can certainly impress us, and there's a lot to learn when it comes to playing Valorant. In regards to other bits and pieces, there is an amazing buff coming to Cypher. It's not massively impactful, but you can now pick up the cyber cages during the buy phase, which, as somebody that frequently just starts around, throws a cyber cage on the ground as I'm like tabbing back into the game, I'm very thankful for this. It's just nice quality of life, but hopefully should be able to up a few more Cypher players' games. Also, weapon updates. The classic right click has had a bit of a consistency fix, namely looking at the efficacy of jumping right clicks, which I haven't been on the bad side of recently, but I have seen a lot of pro tournaments it being used, and yeah, I can imagine it's fairly tilted, so all of the changes on the screen are there to try and make sure that there are inaccuracy penalties in the right positions and at the right times. As well as that, Misker, I don't think there's too much. The Rainer bug fix that we spoke about before has been fixed. Brimstone's one-way smokes that we spoke about has been fixed. There's better spectating tools, but granted, Riot always breaks something else with the spectating when it comes to adding new stuff into it, so there is that. And also, one thing that I wanted to highlight at the end of this video is that Breach had a bit of a bug fix that I think is a bit more of a buff. Not like a hidden buff or anything, but they fixed Aftershock, so now it should apply damage to all characters if multiple agents are hit by it, right? So that was a bit of a problem. I don't think it's that much of a major bug, but I do want to bring up the fact that Breach is expecting buffs at some point. What would you like to see in the next patch for him?
Oh boy. Well, there's like a lot of things you can play with, but I would like to play with negative effects towards allies. I think that's a big one you can mess around with, because the ultimate is strong, like for sure. I feel like the ultimate is the one thing on Breach that nobody denies its power, and you have a lot of ways to set your kills up as well with the different abilities. It is just like a lot of work, and if you think about it, Breach relies a lot on already having information as well, which I think is something that in Valorant can be kind of tricky. If you're attacking, especially with someone like Breach, then yeah, like you're not always gonna have knowledge on someone being around the corner, so it's easier to smoke stuff off so you know that there can't be someone on that sight line. But with Breach, sometimes if you stun, you're not gonna cover that whole corner anyway, so you kind of have to check both sides regardless, and then, you know, like if you didn't hit it, then like what did that ability really do realistically? I just don't think there's enough good situations on different maps to reliably hit things with the different Breach abilities. Yeah, the flash is cool and really strong if you hit it, and is very easy to use, but other than that, I don't know. I feel like the Aftershock and the fault line ability are just not really consistent enough, so I'm not sure what you can do to make those more consistent, but yeah, maybe reduce the negative effects on allies, that would be cool. Don't dwell over though this buff to Cypher. I feel like that is actually pretty huge, because one thing that is a big sort of weakness for Cypher when he is defending, which arguably is the sort of better side for Cypher, right? Then you are gonna have a tough time if you throw down those cages and you spend a bunch of time on that, and then you have to rotate and then you don't have them anymore. But now you will, and I think that is huge. I think it's such a short part of the patch notes, but I think that can actually be really big for this character. So I'll be interested in seeing what that does, and just what the whole patch really does to the game. I'm really excited though. I was a bit worried when they said it was going to be a light patch, but looking at all of this, you know, it feels good that it's patch day, and it's actually like a lot of fun and a lot of interesting bits in here that doesn't just feel like, oh, okay, they fixed this, they tweaked that. It's a lot of impactful things that I could really see having a big difference. So yeah, I'm just excited to be throwing myself into competitive with this.
Yeah, I mean, all of these changes are stuff that I want to try out, but I did want to leave this video on an interesting fact. So a YouTuber that I've content created that I shout out quite a lot is Anders, who's a guy that does a lot of stats based on the pro scene when it comes to what agents are picked. He did go over the recent WePlay tournament in EU, and the thing that I wanted to highlight about Viper is, I mentioned Omen and Brimstone. Omen's pick rate went from 43% to 66%. He was the third most played agent in the games that were played. Brimstone went from 65% to 33%, so 2/3 of the time Omen was playing, 1/3 of the time Brimstone was playing. Viper went from 2.2% pick rate to 0%. So I think there's a little bit more room for Viper to play in, but that's kind of the main point that I mentioned, that the competition is fierce. Even Brimstone's now struggling to this like new version of Omen.
Maybe Omen's
Omen could be a little bit too strong when it comes to some of his gear, but the power, that's another talking point for another day, I think.
Yeah, that's about it. The patch should maybe have some cool skins and other stuff in it as well. We'll report back tomorrow if there's anything we missed or anything they've added just sneakily in there. So yeah, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already to not miss that, and hit that bell. Only 8.3% of people have actually hit that bell. So yeah, we're lacking behind there a little bit, guys. We'd appreciate if you helped us out with that. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. We enjoyed the patch day talk and all this, so we hope you guys enjoy just having it in the background, maybe listening to it as a podcast almost. And we'll be back when there's more.
Maybe we'll do a tier list if that's something that people want to see on the agent selection right now. But thanks for watching, guys. Take care. We'll see you then.